So we have some brand new breaking news about Panama, because Panama's always been this top destination for people who are looking to leave the US and Canada as a second home and as a plan B for residency and much more for really several years. And I've been recommending it for a long time. But there's been recent changes in the visa process and in the availability, and that's changing the landscape a lot, especially for perpetual travelers, anyone who's looking for a second home, and anyone who doesn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to tie up in real estate. So if you're thinking about Panama for any of the reasons that I just talked about, you're not going to want to miss this, because you want to know, is Panama still a good option for second residencies given all these new changes? And that's all coming up today on Renegade News. Welcome back to Renegade News. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. Every week on this channel, you'll discover the latest news, tactics, and strategies to break free from the system, pay less tax, and live anywhere in the world that you want. So let's get right into it. One of the biggest reasons that Panama was an awesome choice for second residencies and for a Plan B option was the Friendly Nations Visa. It allowed almost anyone from Canada, the US, and about 48 other countries with a few $1,000s the ability to get really fast, permanent residency somewhere. But a couple of months ago, Panama made it much more difficult to get the Friendly Nations Visa. I made a breaking news video about that. I'll link to it in the description. It used to be that you could put about $5,000 in a bank account for a couple of days, start a corporation, and then spend a couple of $1,000 in fees, and you were good to go. You had a great permanent residency that was easy to hold on to and keep. But now, with the new changes, you can't get that instant permanent residency. You can get a temporary visa for 2 years, and then you need to apply for a permanent one. You also need to either invest $200,000 in real estate in Panama, or you need to get a job in a Panamanian company, which has its own issues. The Friendly Nations Visa was an option that many younger self-employed online workers were starting to use to move to Panama, and the younger set was really growing in population. The retirement visa, the pensionado, it still exists like it always did. What I suspect is going to happen is we're going to see the landscape kind of shifting back to the older retired people again. Next, and this just happened a couple of days ago, is Panama used to allow foreigners to stay on a tourist visa for up to 6 months. And at one time, you were able to visit for 6 months, leave for a day or two, and then come back, and that 6 months were reset. So there were many people who were living as tourists for several years. A little while back, they changed that. So if you stayed longer than about 4 or 5 months or so, you would have to leave for 30 days to actually get that reset again. But it was never really that consistently enforced. And if you flew out, you were able to usually do it in 1 or 2 days. It was enforced more at the land borders. However, as of October 2021, that's now changing. You can now only stay on a tourist visa for 90 days. And the rumor is after those 90 days, you have to leave for a full 30 days after that. I'm trying to confirm that right now. I've heard it go both ways, so I'm not sure what the final answer on that's going to be. But that makes it nearly impossible to use Panama as a destination as part of a perpetual traveler program or strategy, unless you're planning on traveling to other countries after those 3 months. But the worst problem, in my opinion, is that it takes away Panama as a destination for snowbirds who are looking to leave that sort of harsh Canadian and parts of the US winter behind for 4 to 6 months. And I know a ton of people who are in that situation would come down for 4, 5, 6 months of the year and rent while they were doing it. That is no longer an option, because people aren't going to want to leave for 3 months and then go someplace else for another month. They're going to look at options where they can go for 6 months and spend those 6 months there, like Florida or Mexico. This recent change by the Panamanian government, along with the Friendly Nations change a few months ago and a few other rumors that have been talked about, has a lot of the expats and people who are in the tourist business really scratching their heads, trying to think of strategies how they can work around, or not necessarily work around the new rules, but how they can work within the new rules. The Panamanian government obviously wants people here, and especially Westerners, but they are in a difficult situation because these new rules are really in line with what other countries are doing and their tourist rules. However, with Panama, the big draws in the past for Westerners, for people from Canada and the US especially, were its proximity to North America and the easy visa process. In the many years that I've been living here, almost every person without fail that I've met has been looking for a place to call home. Not necessarily as a full-time home, but as a part-time home or as a second residency and Plan B option. It's not a destination like Hawaii or Mexico where people fly in for 2 weeks and stay at an all-inclusive resort. There are a few exceptions to that, of course. People do fly into Decameron, for example, for a couple of weeks of the all-inclusive thing. And there's people who fly in to do some surfing for a couple of weeks. But Panama has always had this more home or second home vibe. And so many of the people who come here are looking for that, or they're looking for this Plan B option in case things really go bad in the US. And these new rules are definitely flipping that whole landscape on its head. At this point, it can still be a Plan B for retired people because that visa is still an option if you're in that position. And new residents can still get that Friendly Nations visa if they decide they want to stay here permanently and if they're prepared to anchor themselves here with real estate. But anchoring yourself with real estate isn't something that I recommend without you being 100% sure that you want to stay, because while buying real estate here is really easy and we have the same rules as foreigners as the locals do, selling it can take years if you ever want to get rid of it. Panama is still awesome. I mean, I love Panama. I'm not going to lie. It's a beautiful place to call home. It's a great place to live, either full or part-time. And I personally have zero interest living anyplace else. And I still recommend it as a destination for a home, for a second home, someplace that you really want to spend time. But before you think of it as a permanent Plan B or a second home, you should really look into the new digital nomad visa that they're introducing and spend several months here on the ground on that visa to make sure that you're 100% sure and you're 100% satisfied in the location, and you're satisfied enough and you like it enough that you will be prepared to own real estate here. I'm going to get into the digital nomad visa more in another video, but unfortunately, with the new rules, Panama is really no longer a place that I can recommend for getting residency just in case, like we used to talk about before, as a backup plan or as insurance. There's too much of a commitment that you have to make in order to do that now. So come here if you really want to call it home and work from here for a while as a digital nomad, or come here for a few months to spend some time on the ground. But forget about that easy visa and the second home options unless you only want your second home for 90 days at a time, or if you're prepared to actually buy real estate so you can get that longer visa option. So what I'd like you to do now is let me know in the comments below if those changes are going to affect your Panama travel plans. Is Panama still someplace that you're going to want to visit and spend time just as strictly as a tourist? Or were you only traveling here to check it out as a potential second home option and someplace that you could get a residency? Because in this uncertain world, if you want to have real freedom, you need to look at having a Plan B. And that Plan B consists of second residency, second citizenships, international bank accounts, and businesses, and really so much more that you have to look into. But as these new laws are proving, in the case of Panama and in the case of the world, these rules are changing constantly and it's getting more difficult everywhere. So that's why you should subscribe to Renegade News right now, because that way every week you'll discover the latest infringements and wins in your search for more freedom and liberty in this unfree world. And don't forget to check out the video that you see on the screen right now, because we're going to be talking about more tips on living with more personal, financial, and location independence. We're going to be talking more about Panama. We're going to be talking about other places as well where you can lay that second residency hat to call your other home. I'm Glenn Kowalski from Renegade News, and I'll see you over there.